One of the landmines that sometimes can destroy a perfectly normal conversation and can distort what has been till now a very nice casual relationship is asking someone, tell me, how much do you earn? Or asking someone, what is your net worth? Or even sometimes, tell me, how much did you pay for that house? Now, it's something everyone wonders about, it's something everyone thinks about, but anyone who has a little bit of tact knows when or when not to ask the question. Definitely to whom or to whom not to ask those kind of questions too. As a matter of the fact, in Lashon Kodesh, a person's estate, all that a person owns, his net worth, including his real estate, his money, diamonds, there's a word for it. The umbrella word for all of that is called nechasim. Nun, chaf, samach, yud, nun. Someone says, all of my nechasim go to Hegdish, that means that he donated everything that he owns to Hegdish. Why is a person's complete net worth referred to as his nechasim? So Chazal dashen nechasim from the lashon of covered up. The shayrish of the word nechasim comes from the word of covering up. And a person's assets are nechasim mizeh v'nigolim mizeh, the Gemara says. It's covered up to one person and revealed to someone else. In other words, no one really knows what someone else owns. As the Vel says, not all that shines is gold. Sometimes we think so-and-so is real rich, especially when we ask him for a loan, and he rejects it. We think he's really rich and he's just plain stingy. And the truth is he's not as rich as we think he is, and the truth is he may be struggling very hard to make those payments on his car or on his house. And all those beautiful chasanas that he made that we're so envious of. You don't know what his credit card bills are. You don't know if he had to take a third mortgage on his house in order to be able to keep up with the Joneses, chasana across the street. Chafetz Chaim says this is one of the things you're supposed to think about. When so-and-so, the rich neighbor, refuses to lend you some money for a while or to cash a check for you, how do you know he's stingy? Maybe he only gives the impression that he's rich, but he may have more chayvus than you'll ever earn in a lifetime. And very often it's the other way around. You have the schlepper that walks on the street with holes in both of his shoes, holes in his pants, an oversized shirt, an undersized hat, and then it turns out you know how much money he has stashed away in his mattress. So money is a funny thing. It can be very deceiving in terms of how we rate people. And therefore the words that Chazal used to describe a person's net worth is nechasim, covered up from one person and revealed to another. Now, the bottom line is, it's covered up to the outsiders and it's revealed to the person himself. Most people, not everyone, but most people do know themselves what they're worth and what they own. The term nechasim in Shas is usually used as a description of a person either engaged in a transaction of selling or giving or inheriting. People are dealing with their nechasim in terms of control of their nechasim. Whether they're making a neder that so-and-so can't have any pleasure, can't derive any hana from my nechasim, whether I'm giving it to Hegdish. So, if anything, why don't you call it revealed? Because it's revealed to the person who's dealing with and covered up to the outside world. So the Chiddush says there must be a deeper message in the terminology here, in referring to a person's money as nechasim, as the covered entity. And the reason for that, says the Chiddush, is that what gives money chashivas, what gives anything in this world chashivas, is the fact that someone else doesn't have it. If everyone on your block had a Rolls Royce, then you wouldn't feel all that proud driving down your block. You probably would have a very difficult time parking and getting past double parked cars. If everyone in your entire neighborhood had the most beautiful house, that would really deflate the feeling that you have in terms of your social stature that's related to your house. You can have the most gorgeous villa with ponds in front and swimming pools and fountains and the most beautiful trees. But if everyone else has it, it's just an average house. And once it's average, then people don't feel as good about it anymore. We've mentioned this many times. The successor to the Chiddush Erim, his grandson, the Sfas Emes, came to the Tish Friday night. He was a very young man. And there was a big commotion as he was about to come in. He stood by the door and he said, I'm not going in until the people stop shoving and pushing each other. So one of the older Hasidim was a little bit slighted by this. He said, to the young Rebbe, in all due respect, that your grandfather, the Chiddushei HaRim, used to come into the tish and there was plenty of shoving and pushing. And he never said, I'm not coming in till the pushing stops. So the Sfas said there's a big difference. He said in my grandfather's days that people were pushing themselves to get closer to the tish, to hear the Rebbe's Torah, to hear his miros. These people aren't pushing themselves to get closer. They're pushing the other person out of the way so no one else should be in front of them. This kind of a pushing my grandfather wouldn't have tolerated either. We all know the old cliche of the person who was busy placing the marble or picking exactly what color brick should be in front of his exquisite front lawn and stairway, and a neighbor from across the street said, I insist that you take that color. And the person said, excuse me, but why are you insisting on what color I have to take? And the neighbor said, you're only doing it for me, right? So doesn't it make sense I should decide what color it should be? So the real chashivos of money, in terms of how this world views money, is when you get out of a fancy car and no one else can afford such a fancy car, and people are whispering behind your back, he must be doing very well lately. That's when you really kvel. That's when you really feel good about it. So it's the mystery of money. It's the fact that it's inaccessible to someone else. It's covered up for others, and it's revealed to you. That's what gives money its stature. That's what makes the person who owns money so terribly proud of himself, as if he can keep it forever. How do you say a wallet in Lashon Kodesh? A kiss. Chaf, Yod, Samach. Again, from the Lashon of, to cover up. What's the chashivas of the money in your wallet? The fact that no one else knows exactly how much it is, and people are oohing and eyeing and estimating and guessing. In any event, it's covered up to them. They can't have access to it, and you do. And that is unfortunately what makes us feel good about money. In the first Rashi of this week's Pasha, Rashi explains the Lashon of tzav es b'nei Yisrael, command the b'nei Yisrael. This extra sort of stand at attention and listen, this extra zirus that the Pasuk offers us, is an introduction to the Pasha of the Karban Oila. Even though we have already been introduced to Karbanis and Pashas V'yikra, but now we're specifically discussing the Karban Oila. And why is the Karban Oila different than other Karbanis? If you bring a shlamim, so the Kohanim get part of it goes up on the Mizbeach, and part of it you get, and you eat with your family. And on the contrary, if you bring a real nice, big carbon shalom, an expensive carbon, so there's a certain stature that goes along with it. You're sitting in your shalayim with your family. You're sitting in your hotel room, and you're eating this juicy carbon shalomim that you were zecher to bring to the Beis HaMikdash, what a mitzvah. Even if you bring a carbon chata, so you don't get to eat any of the meat, but you feel the Kohanim are eating the meat, and the Kohanim thank you, and whether or not the Kohanim are officially considered your agents or agents of Hashem is a dispute in the Gemara. But the point is, it makes sense to you. The Kohanim are eating, the Kohanim are raising their spiritual level through these holy meals, and they're doing it on behalf of your kapara. But a carbon oila is in a world for itself. A carbon oila is placed up on a mizbeach, and it's completely consumed on a mizbeach. No one gets anything. I can't show off to my friends what a big and beautiful carbon I have brought, because everything gets burnt on the mizbeach. The Kohanim aren't going to ooh and ah about what a delicious carbon I brought for them to enjoy. My friends aren't going to see me eating this carbon with my family. I can't have the honor of inviting others to join with me. I just bring this carbon and it gets all burnt up. So suddenly, wealth, stature, as we understand it, somehow gets lost over here with the carbon oil. Twice a day, Klal Yisrael brings the carbon oil as the kapara. There are times a yid has to bring a carbon oil. There are times he can donate a carbon oil. A carbon oil is a kapara and his machshava. But it requires a certain sense of, be careful over here. It requires an injection of enthusiasm. It requires attention. You're now going to bring a carbon oil. You may not feel the same way you're going to feel when you bring other karbanis. The yoyser tzarach hakasav lezares. You have to really be mezares someone. The Makash Yesh Chasar and Kiss says Rashi. That's why it says tzav es b'nei Yisrael. What does Chasar and Kiss mean? According to the Chiddushei HaRim, we can understand it very well. I lose the cover-up for money. I lose the whole enticement of money. I can't show off with this carbon. This carbon oil is between me and the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's a direct line. No one else seems to have anything to do with it. And perhaps that's why the carbon oil is a kapara from machshava. Perhaps it's the type of machshava that somehow takes over our lives in terms of constantly checking and looking behind us, what are others thinking about us. Maybe it's these kinds of machshavas that need the kapara. And the carbon oil is completely burnt up and no one's going to see my marble outside. Here lies the real test. Who is and who is not sincere when it comes to spending for the sake of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now, where does this discussion lead us? Given that before Pesach, spending money is not an uncommon discussion, and the frustrations that go along with it can be challenging, sometimes overwhelming. So let's review perhaps some of our responsibilities and put that into focus. The Rambam in Hilchos Matnas Aniyim, Perik Yud, Halacha Zayin says that there are 8 descending levels of giving tzedakah. He starts at the top and works his way to the bottom. The greatest tzedakah she'ein l'mala minena, says the Rambam, is taking someone who has an existing household going, approaching someone who has an existing business going, a business that is now faltering, a situation that may collapse, and you are mechazik him to keep him going. Whether it's through a present, or through a loan, or you offer him some type of a business deal, which may not be in the best interest for you, you find him some type of a job. In other words, you took someone who until now did not have to ask others for money, and you created a set of circumstances where he will be as Hashem Yisroch still not have to ask anyone else for money. That's the mitzvah of Hechazak Tabay, and it is also the greatest madrega of tzedakah. The lashon of the Rambam, Maila Gedola she'ein l'mayla mimena. Now, we'll get back to this in a moment, but let's run through now our descent into lesser levels of tzedakah. Give tzedakah to a poor person, but you don't know who you're giving it to, and the poor person doesn't know who he's taking it from. That is a very great level of tzedakah, although not the highest. There was a special room in the Beis HaMikdash called Lishkas Chashayim, set up for this type of an arrangement, where the givers didn't know who they were giving to, and the takers didn't know who they were taking from. Step down, a rung less in the madrega of tzedakah. The giver knows who he's giving it to, but the ani doesn't know from whom he is taking it. So the Gemara tells us the story of Mar Ukva and his wife. He used to drop off packages by people's houses, and they made sure for the people never to see who was dropping off the package. And once when someone tried to chase them down, they even ran into an oven. Fulfilling the words of Chazal, it is better that a person be cast into a fiery furnace than embarrass someone else in public. Miraculously, both Mar Ukva and his wife were saved, although while Mar Ukva's wife came out completely unscathed, the soles of Mar Ukva's feet were charred. The Gemara explains, while Mar Ukva normally would distribute funds, his wife would distribute food. And being that the food was there for the poor person to eat, and Mar Ukva gave money, but you had to buy food, so by extension it was just a tiny drop removed a little bit more, her zchus was greater than his. Now the benefit of the ani not knowing from whom he or she is receiving the tzedakah is obvious. This way, the recipient doesn't have to be embarrassed when the giver passes by on the street, because you don't know who the giver is. A rung less on the level of tzedakah, the ani does know from whom he or she is getting the money, but the giver doesn't know who is receiving the money. And the Gemara tells us stories of tzaddikim like Rabbi Abba who would intentionally drop coins on the street by design in the path of a poor person who would come along and find it. The poor people know they got it from Rabbi Abba, but they're not embarrassed because they know Rabbi Abba doesn't know exactly who picked it up. Let's step down one level. It's already a situation where the giver knows who he's giving it to and the taker knows who he's taking it from. But at least you gave it to the person before the one in need had to ask for it. A level less than that is where the ani had to come and ask for it. And that busha within itself diminishes to a certain degree the level of tzedakah. Of course, how much his respect has been diminished depends how you respond to him. A level less than that is where you give him the tzedakah a little bit less than what you ought to give him. And of course, what you ought to give him depends on a whole host of different situations, which we really can't go into now. And no one really knows the answer to that more so than the person himself. But at least, even if you don't give him as much as you should, you give it to him with a smile. a lesser level, and that is you give it to him with the absence of a smile, or even worse, with sort of a sour face, as if, all right, stop nudging me here, take this. That, of course, is the least level of tzedakah. And over here, where Chazal say, better is the white smile of your teeth than the milk that you give a poor person, over here there is the danger of doing more damage than good. Now, first of all, you may ask, why the Rambam lists these 8 levels of tzedakah in descending order as opposed to ascending order? Shouldn't he start from the worst kind of tzedakah to give and work his way up? And the answer really is in a Rashi in Pashut Shlach. In the instructions for the Meraglim, Moshe Rabbeinu told the Meraglim to see the lesser areas of Eretz Yisrael, the rocky parts, and then to go to the fertile parts. Rashi says, Kein derech hatagarim. You first show the inferior merchandise, and then the customer begins to ooh and ah as you get to the better merchandise. If you start the other way around, you show the most beautiful merchandise first, and then you start showing the cheaper merchandise, so human psychology works the other way. Oh, that's even cheaper, and that's even more junk, and you have this real sinking feeling, and this is the only thing I can afford, the bottom of the barrel. Had the Rambam given it to us in ascending order, so I would think the bottom is not so bad. Look, I'm giving the tzedakah, so I give it to him with a sorrow face. He should be happy that he's getting it. And if I'm a real tzaddik, I'll go a step higher. I'll give it to him with a smile. But when you look at the top madrigas, you'll say, look, I'm not such a rich man that I should go and find myself someone who's about to stumble and help him support his business before he stumbles. It's the highest level of tzedakah. That's out of my reach. By the Rambam listing it the other way around, the Rambam's giving us the message. You ought to try for the best. If you have no choice, take a lesser level. If you have no choice, take a lesser level. And it's a real sorrow state if you're all the way down at the bottom and you force yourself to give the poor person a couple of pennies and to add insult to injury, you do it with a frown. But getting back to the first and highest level of tzedakah, you're not giving the person anything. You may just be extending him a loan. You're not taking something out of your pocket. You may just work to find a friend a job. They're not announcing your name by an appeal in shul, because all you really did is you got on the phone and tried to set up some customers to help out a friend. And this is the highest level of tzedakah. There can't be anything higher. You know why? What did I get out of a tzedakah like this? Stature? Kavod? Is anyone going to ooh and ah and say, heard how much so-and-so donated? Is there going to be a big plaque with my name in blazing lights because I found so-and-so a customer? And the answer is no. I can't even point to what I did. I can't even show a check for my effort. This is very similar to the korban oila, which is completely consumed on the mizbeach, and is considered the highest of all korbanos. There are 2 reasons why a butcher has to be an erol chayim. There are 2 reasons why a butcher shop has to have a good hashgacha. Besides for the actual sheet of the meat, that takes place in the slaughterhouse. That's a separate hashgacha. But I am referring to after the meat has already been delivered from the slaughterhouse, even after it was shechted properly and checked properly to make sure it's not safe. When it comes to the butcher, there are 2 additional reasons why the butcher has to be an erlich person. And both of those reasons come from this week's parsha. Certain types of fat from the animal are aser, not just aser, but there is the severe punishment of kares for eating it denezit. And the Torah also tells us, so the butcher has to do what's called triggering, remove the forbidden fat. Certain parts of the animal are completely removed, like the rear. And the butcher has to, which really our grandmothers used to do, but nowadays it's the butcher who salts the meat to remove the dam. Now, there is a major distinction between the Isser of Chaylev and the Isser of Dam. In regard to Chaylev, the Torah says, only behemoths that could be brought up on the Mizbeach, only their Chaylev is aser. And even here, we refer only to the actual fats that are brought on the Mizbeach. There are different types of the fats in the animal, which aren't as severe, and some aren't aser at all. But no such distinction is made in regard to the dam. In regard to dam, the pasuk says simply, "V'chol dam, l'seichu b'chol ma sheseichem l'ois v'la behema." It makes no difference whether it's a behema or a chaya or a bird. All blood is asa. So again, in regard to fat, only the fat of the behema is asa, not that of an ois or a chaya. When it comes to dam, all dam is asa. Interestingly enough, when it comes to a nezela, which is a dead animal, the animal is tameh. However, the dam and the chaylev of a dead animal are not tameh. Now what's interesting is when it comes to karbanos, as we see many times throughout Parshas Vayikra and Tzav, and wherever the Torah talks about karbanos, the chaylev which goes up on the mizbeach, and the dam which is applied or sprinkled on the mizbeach, are the major part of the kapara process. Rav Shamshua Fol Hirsch, Zechain Levracha, explains this as follows. Basically speaking, the life of the animal is represented by the blood in the animal. The blood is what carries life to all of the animal's organs. Without blood, nothing exists. Even the heart, the major organ of the body, is only there to pump the blood. Chaylev, the fat, is really the product of the body. In other words, if you had to describe what a body is, or at least in terms of how we would relate to the human body, it's the fat. The fat is sort of the final product of the digestive system. In a sense, it's sort of the ultimate aim of the whole organic life. All the organs work to maintain the fat and the skin around it. Now, Rav Shamshua Fol Hirsch has a very interesting thing. Chaylev, spelled Tzeireches, Segel Lamed and Veis, are the same letters as Chala, which means milk. Ches Lamed Veis, except that it's spelled Kamitz Ches and Kamitz Lamed. In a sense, of course, symbolically speaking, when a person eats and his dam is converted into fat, that's for his selfish purposes. Dam that is converted to chalav, to milk, is done for purposes of love and purposes of sustaining others. The dam and the chaylev that are offered as karbonos are directives to us. How we take the human body, which our neshama is clothed in, a body that by nature is interested only in itself, and we convert it to serve Hashem. We take the natural, instinctive aims within us to think only about ourselves, and we direct it toward the service of Hashem and the service of Klal Yisrael. And that's what Karbanos taught us. That's what the atmosphere of the Beis HaMikdash taught us. It changed the person. It changed the very essence. His mere blood and flesh was directed to a whole different objective as a result of the Beis HaMikdash experience. And that is why Chaylev and Dam, in the absence of service to Hashem, is Aser. Furthermore, explains Rav Hirsch, while we allow the other organs and materials of the animal to be assimilated by man, that's because the human organism can adapt it through limit hatayra, through making brachos, through the proper objectives in life in general. They become karbonos within us. When we have the Beis HaMikdash, the shulchan, the table of a person is mechaper, if we eat the right way. However, the dam and the chaylev per se, which is the drive in the animal instinct to think only about itself, that cannot be assimilated by the person and converted to good. It just won't work. You need a Beis HaMikdash for that. You need karbanos. You need an environment of Yerushalayim and Kaihanim and Leviim singing, of pure Ruchnius. You need a very vivid embassy of Shemayim in order to take the real instinctive animal nature that is within us and to convert it completely l'tayv. We can't do that today without a Beis HaMikdash. So in other words, being that the selfish animal purpose in life that cannot be converted to good, represented by the chaylev and the dam, must not enter our systems, therefore there is such a severe issue in regard to both chaylev and dam. Why? would neither chaylev or dam be affected by tumas nezela? How come they're not tameh in a dead animal? So Rav Hirsch explains further. The prototype of tumah is the mess, a human body that is no longer alive. Why is the human body tameh? Because there was a struggle here in the body. There was the neshama that was going one way and the guf going the other way. And the human body has the greatest degree of tumah, like the Yerech Chaim HaKadosh says. If you have a jar that was full of honey, after you empty out the honey, there are going to be more insects crawling around it than a jar that was just full of water. So the guf which contained the neshama, and the neshama drew all of the koiches of guf l'tayv, basically is the honey that is now in Odom Haba, that is now in a situation of ultimate menuchas and nefesh, and the guf remains completely separated from it. Now every part of the human body would be metame, but inasmuch as the chaylev and the dam of the behema are concerned, they are not metame. And this is to show us, explains Rav Hirsch, that they were never part of the equation. We were never allowed to consume dam or chaylev because there's nothing you can do with it. The dam and the chaylev represent the animal instincts which cannot be changed l'tayv, only in the format of the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, if there's no battle, there's no honey, so to speak. And there's no tumah. But what is yet to be explained is, what is the reason that chaylev is also only for a behema, not the chaylev of a chay and a oif, whereas dam is also regardless of what type of dam it is. The only blood that isn't technically also is the blood of a fish, because that's considered like more part of the flesh. Even there could be an issue of marasayin, but the dam of oif and the dam of chayis are just as also as the dam of behema. So why the difference? And this is explained in the Sefer Pete Tzadik, which is a kitzur of the Svarim of Tzadik HaKayim. Chaylev and dam are the shayrish for the two words midos hara'is, taiva, temptation, and kas, anger. Chaylev, which is the fat, the ultimate final stop for our food, and that represents the taiva. Dam, it represents aggression, anger. In regard to the Yetzer Hara for taiva, we find that even liyasud love, even after Mashiach is going to come, we're going to still need that a little bit. In order we should be able to use it for chedves of the shmaitza, for the joy in chayshik, for Torah, mitzvahs, and chesed. Kas, on the other hand, while there may be a valid place for it down here in this world, where we have to use it against the Yetzer Hara and sometimes against Rishayim and so on, given the proper context. But liyasud lavi, after the Kadosh Baruch Hu will shecht the Yetzer Hara. So midas hakas will be totally out of the picture. There is no use for it. In other words, although there are times that we can or may have to get angry down here in this world, it's a very temporary kind of a passion. Eventually it's going to be totally useless. Therefore, the dam, which represents the anger within us, is represented by a broader isser. The isser of dam applies to behemoths, chayes, and oisais alike. On the other hand, the chaylev, which represents taiva, isn't as universally prohibited. Because while taiva and kas could be used for good things, by kas it's only temporary, and in regard to taiva, it'll always be used for good things. Even after Mashiach comes, we will still have taiva for our cheshik and Torah and mitzvahs. As a result, the chaylev, which represents the isser of taiva, is limited in its scope as well, because the isser is limited. Now he goes on to explain as follows. Every behema and chaya, from the smallest one-cell amoeba to the most complex of mammals, everything has a purpose in this world. It's all part of the cycle. Like the Rambam explains in his Akdama to Seder Zroyim. And this was the Chachma Shlomo HaMelech. He knew the tachlis of every eitz and eden, of every plant, of every type of wood, how it all fit into the ecological cycle of Sheshus Yimei Bereshis. The Yedaber al ha'eitzim v'al ha'avonim. He knew the purpose of everything. So every animal has its place. The issue of chaylev in every animal also has its place. In other words, the chaylev of every living thing is mashpia, a cheshik, for a different mitzvah. We draw from the chaylev a certain satisfaction as we consume it, as we eat it, as it becomes part of our body. And in turn, that develops a different enthusiasm for a different kind of mitzvah. So in regard to behemoths, the cheshek for mitzvahs that has to come from behemoths comes from karbanos. We don't have karbanos b'zman hazeh, so it says already kol ha'isek b'tayr sayla kilu hikri v'ayla. And of course, we await the opportunity of those karbanos again. In regard to chayes, which as a rule is not brought on the mizbeach, so the Torah allows us to eat the chayla directly, to be me'orah the cheshek for those specific mitzvahs. Being that taiva, and that is enthusiasm for the right things, will always have a place within our system, therefore, there is a makom for chayla to be consumed by us. Whether it's through karbanos in regard to the behemoths, or through direct food in regard to chayes. But the kas represented by the dam, that only the mizbeach could be misaking. We have no shaykhs with that. We don't want that to become part of our system in any form whatsoever, because eventually we want it totally out of us. Aga, he explains to us, how did Chazal prescribe the medicine of battling against the Yitzhar of Taiva? So Chazal say, try learning Torah, say Shema, if need be, Yaskula Yom Hanisa. In other words, let a person think how embarrassed he is going to be eventually when he has to come to terms with what he did, and that should stop him from chait. But in terms of battling kas, it's harder. And therefore you have to think about the opposite. You have to think about the days of Simcha. Think about the Purim that just passed. Think about happy times. Think about when you got along together so well. Let's face it. When someone's in a very good mood and everything is going your way, my way, we don't tend to get angry. We're not that upset when someone didn't do what we asked them to do. We're not that upset when someone said no to a favor that we requested when we thought that we did the same for him and even more. If things are going your way, we can absorb all of this. During a simcha, most people have it within them to extend even to their people that they weren't getting along with that well, a nice l'chaim with a smile. It's during difficult times that things get aggravated and amplified, and little things bother us so much more. So how do you fight the Yitzhar of kas? Schacter tzav. Think about happy times. In other words, think about what's really bothering you over here. Is it the couple of dollars? Is it the frustration? Or is it that you're just frustrated now? And another eitzah he says is, think about people that have so much more serious problems. Think about the terrible sorrows that Klal Yisrael is undergoing. B'chlal u'b'prat. How many families are suffering? And you're going to get angry and upset about what? About a phone call that should have been made and wasn't? About money that should have been returned and wasn't? About a raise you should have gotten, or about what an employee said, or what your wife or husband could have said and didn't say, or did what he or she did say when they were not supposed to say it? Think about people who have more serious problems. Think about people who are in greater pain. And then compare yours to theirs. Do you have a right to be angry? Or is it just being selfish? Is it being unrealistic? In any event, taking the Yitzhar of Taiva and putting it into its place, taking the Yitzhar of kas and anger and putting it into its place, is equivalent to being makriv, the dam, or the chayil of Adam Mizbeach, and makes a person privy to all of the tahara and kapara that comes along with it. Finally, the Shem Shulef al-Hirsch explains, basically, the reason we don't drink dam or eat chayil of Bizman Mizeh is because it's something that's supposed to be reserved just for karbanos. Whatever the lofty ideas or reasons that we do or don't understand are behind it. On an elementary level, that's the Pashat of Pshat. The avodah of the chayil is reserved for the Mizbeach. The avodah of dam is reserved for the Mizbeach. We can't absorb it. We can't deal with it. We don't have a Mizbeach now anyhow. So this is how we are displaying our emunah. When a Yid holds himself back from chaylev or dam, when a Yid is careful of kashrus, it's another way of saying, sooner or later the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built, and we're going to have karbanos, and we're going to have the tikkunim and the kapara that we have been waiting for, and I am not going to do anything now to distort that. As a matter of fact, Reb Tzadok Klein explains, one of the reasons this upcoming Shabbos is called Shabbos Hagadol is because it is from this Shabbos and on that Klal Yisrael learned to eat properly, to absorb their food in a manner of Kiddush as if they were Karbanis. Moshe Rabbeinu was Mekadosh the Chodesh for the first time, in Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The holding of Kiddush HaChodesh shows the ability of a Yid to assimilate the entire world into Kiddusha, to bring down the Kiddusha of the Yonatayim into this world by virtue of his Amunah, his attitude. From Rosh Chodesh Nisan until 10 days in Nisan, there was a 10-stage Tahara process, because the whole Tahara of Mitzrayim worked in 10 steps. Each of the 10 Makos was a Tahara for Klal Yisrael, was a Refuah for Klal Yisrael. And on Shabbos, the 10th of Nisan, they were zeicha to the final level of Tahara. And here's where they were given the order to prepare the Korban Pesach. So from this day and on, from Shabbos HaGadol and on, the food that we eat, L'Shem Shemayim, becomes like Karbanis within us. So whether it's the food that we're eating of the whole ways L'Shem Shemayim before Pesach, the Shabbos HaGadol Suda, or the food by the Seder night, and the matzah which brings Amunah and Refuah to us, it's all the same. It represents our belief in the Rabbeinu Shalom and our ability to take the Tumah of the world to turn it into Kiddusha. A couple once came into the Tel of Rosh Hashiva of Chaim Mavcha Kas, the Chaim Levracha, and they presented the following difficulty that they were having. One of the things that the wife wanted from the husband is that he should take out the garbage, pour it into the incinerator on his way out in the morning. The husband responded by saying that this was an affront to him. He was a Ben Torah, and he didn't spend all those years in yeshiva in order to spill garbage. The Talmud of Yeshiva was a little bit taken aback by this debacle. Obviously, this argument had flared up, and many other things were injected into it as well, but this seemed to be the pivotal point that everything evolved about. And so the Talmud of Yeshiva gave a strange sock. He said, you know something? You are a Ben Torah. A Ben Torah should not be pouring out garbage. Okay, the wife couldn't say anything. She was astounded that the Rosh Hashiva would answer that way, but that's what he said. And she remained astounded until the next morning, when the doorbell rang. She ran to open up the door, and there was the Tel Rosh Hashiva. The wife said to her husband, who was getting ready to leave to yeshiva, I think you have a visitor. Rosh Hashiva, why is the Rosh Hashiva here? Is everything all right? Oh, everything is fine. Actually, I've come here this morning to take out the garbage. You see, I'm not that kind of a Ben Torah. I'm the kind of Ben Torah that doesn't mind pouring out the garbage. Would you mind telling me where it is so I can do it? The Chassam Sofer points out a fascinating thing. Look through the whole Parashat Vayikra, in all of the instructions, how to process the karbanis. The pasuk never mentions Aaron directly. The pasuk says, speak to the Bnei Aharon and tell the Bnei Aharon to do this, tell the Bnei Aharon to do that. There's only one time when the pasuk says command Aaron himself. It doesn't say Bnei Aharon. At the beginning of this Pasha, tzav es Aharon the Esbana. How come it doesn't say over here Bnei Aharon like it does throughout the whole Parashat Vayikra? So the Chassam Sofer, because which mitzvah is the Torah going to command over here? The mitzvah of taking out the ashes. The kohen has to change his clothes. He has to take all the ashes that piled up over here and take them out michutz lamachna, outside of the camp. Lest one not think that this mitzvah of haitzas hadeshin, of removing the leftover ashes, the parts that are not going to be used anymore, so that someone should not think that somehow this is a prisus hakavod, that the one who is assigned this particular work, perhaps he is a less dignified person because he's doing this. Like the pasuk to Aharon. Here's the one time where Aaron HaKohen's name is mentioned specifically. This is a kavod, not the opposite of such. Now, if you think the connection over here, or the analogy, is a little bit far-fetched, well, let's listen a little bit more to how the Chassam Sofer explains this. He quotes the Magen Avraham and Simon Taf Mem Dalet. And the question is asked, should a person rather learn Torah or fulfill mitzvahs? The psak halacha is, if there is someone else that can fulfill the mitzvah as good as you can, then allow him to do it, and you opt to go to the Beis HaMedrash and learn. If there is no one else who can perform this particular mitzvah, only you, then you are obligated to do so. Rabbi Eliyahu Chaim Mazel was considered to be a goyen in Chesed. And once during a meeting, someone pointed out that Rabbi Eliyahu Chaim is a gadol b'Torah, but all the time that he spends with tzedakah and Chesed is goyim bittul Torah. So maybe he would have been greater if he wouldn't spend so much time running these activities. So Rabbi Chaim answered. He said, a Rav that closes his Gemara, and he has to be Oisik and Chesed, and you should know even when his Gemara is closed, it's open. And a Rav who does not close his Gemara when Chesed is necessary to be done, when he delegates it to others and as a result it's not done as well, or isn't done at all, or is done in a delayed fashion, then even when his Gemara is open, you should know it's considered a closed Gemara. Dr. Samsoiber, there's a remnant to that in the fact that throughout Parshas Vayikra, whenever we have over here instructions for the Avodah, the instructions are B'nei Aharon, not Aaron himself. Because the limud HaTorah of Aaron was very chashuv to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And if the B'nei Aharon can do it as good as he can, let them do the Avodah. The mitzvah, however, of gathering up the ashes from the Mizbeach and carrying it out teaches us the midah of anivus, the midah of modesty. The fact that it's officially considered one of the avodas, where the kohen has to change his clothes and put on sort of work clothes and carry these shovels of ashes to a place michutz lamachna. This, as the Chovos HaLevavos explains, is to emphasize that no one can be a Baal Gaiva in the Beis HaMikdash. Ein Gaiva l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen, of carrying out the ashes, is a mitzvah to teach another, is a mitzvah to command us that when you're supposed to take out the garbage, then you have no right not to take out the garbage. And therefore, here the Torah singles out Aaron HaKohen. Not B'nei Aaron, but Aaron. And if the person feels somewhat diminished by this, then that's the point. If this is the kind of person who is diminished when he has to take out the garbage, so the Torah is instructing him to take out the garbage. If Aaron HaKohen can do it, you can do it too. Now Chazal dash, the first psukim of our Sedra, Zois Torah Ha'oila. Ha'oila means going up. Someone who's a Baal Gaiva, who's always thinking about himself, imagining himself as a star, rising, fame, Hamizgoeh, the pasuk says Vaiter, Al Moikta, and goes on to the fire. Kol Hamizgoeh Nisraf, it's dangerous. The person who thinks too much about himself can get burnt. And that, says the Chaim Sofer, is the connection here in the pasuk. Tzav Haharon, yes, bon of Lema Zois Torah Ha'oila, look out if you feel a little bit over-ambitious to get your name into the newspapers, because Al Moikta, that's firewood. And if you've already overstepped the boundaries of Gaiva to the point where, no, I'm not going to take out the garbage, so right here and then, the very next pasuk, that's the connection here, instructs us for lava shakayin midayvad, that the kohen put on a special linen garment, and the heyer mitzadesh, and he went to take up the ashes. There's greatness, and you have to find modesty there as well, in order for that greatness to be a real greatness. If Aaron HaKohen's name is mentioned, then within that same context, you also have to have an expression of modesty. The emes is that the ashes were piled up near the Mizbeach. And for the most part, at least at the beginning, they were sort of nivla b'makoyma. They were absorbed right there and then. Eventually, when we have over here piles that are not getting absorbed into the ground, so they're carried out michutz lamachna. The Baal Tanya explains when a person feels the flame of Torah and mitzvahs, and he's zeicha to see the greatness of Torah, or he's zeicha to be in the company of great tzaddikim. As a result, in the course of this hislavos, this ruchniistic fire that is burning within him, he may feel himself to be a little bit distant. And who am I compared to all of this? And what do I know? And that's good. The Marav Shamish says that if a person davens and walks away thinking that was the greatest davening, wow, was that a good Shemoneh Esrei, I just davened. Well, there's a good chance that that means that tefillos didn't go up if you're still thinking about it so much. That means they remained within you. But if you walk away thinking, okay, good, but let me try to do better next time, well, that's the same that the tefillos have stored up. So the idea of after a ruchniistic experience that the person feels, look, But who am I? These are the ashes. These ashes are precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they're placed right near the Mizbeach, and they're absorbed into the ground, into the Makom HaMikdash. But that's only if there's a little bit of it. A little bit of a feeling, okay, I have to do better, I'm going to try harder. As good as it was, I can still grow. That's good. But at the point that he feels so despondent, and who am I? What kind of avodah am I involved in? I'm a nothing. To the point where it begins to backfire and he says, what's the point of trying? That means that there are so many ashes over here that they're not being nivla b'mekayim, they're not being absorbed into the normal growing process of ruchnius. Rather, it begins to act as a deterrent by making the person depressed. This you have to scoop up and carry out mechutz l'machna, because this is not positive at all. This is, as the Baal Tanya describes it, in a skufa hanedresses l'ragli hachitzonim. This is like a threshold to invite in the koiches atuma into the person when he begins to feel that I'm too far gone. I get us to think, I'm choshech lo yachshech mucha. No darkness is too dark for a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and no distance is too far. But the Rebbeinu Shalom sees you wherever you are and is always willing to take you back. So the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen, where the kohen had to take part of it, put it next to the Mizbeach, and from time to time completely remove it, this is the mitzvah of the balance that a person has to maintain throughout his lifetime. On the one hand, to feel that he's not perfect, and on the other hand, not to allow the waves of depression to rip him away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how do you know if the modesty that I have is the good kind of modesty, if it's the kind of ashes that's supposed to be absorbed by the Mizbeach, or it's the kind that's supposed to dump out? The Ber Moshe of the Yoshev Rebbe explains, as many others do, look to see what it leads to. If it leads to a cheshik that you want to do better next time, it's the good kind of modesty. If you feel like closing the Gemara and walking away because what's the point, then you should know this is the dangerous kind of modesty. That's not modesty, that's tumma, that's depression. And this is what Avraham Avinu meant when he said, V'yanochi afar ve'efer, I am mere dust and ashes. Okay, sounds like a very modest statement. But does that sound like a depressing statement? What am I? I'm nothing. I'm just dust or ashes. So to Ben Moshe, but look at the context of what Avraham Avinu was saying. Avraham Avinu was saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, had those kings killed me in the war, I would just be dust. Had Nimrod burnt me, I would be ashes. So in other words, Avraham Avinu was expressing his modesty in the form of, thank you Hashem for rescuing me. Rebbeinu Shalom, you saved me, you must care for me because I'm still alive over here to be able to express this. And therefore, knowing that I'm nothing more than dust and ashes, I beseech you, and Avraham Avinu continued his tefillah. So we see the fine line. He is maintaining his anava, not allowing the tumah of gaiva to step in and carry him over the fence, but by that same token, he expresses it in such a way where he's rooting out his inferiority complex. The Rebbeinu Shalom, you saved me, you gave me the kayach to survive until here, I must be something. And the emphasis is the Ber Moshe that that's the difference between offer and afer. Offer is dust. Dust basically is useless. Reb Chaim Vital says that all of the midos of a person are embedded into certain elements of nature, laziness, presumably I believe it says also atzvus, that's in the yisoid of offer and the yisoid of dust. Ashes, on the other hand, really is the waste of something positive. Ashes means that there was a fire here, that there was energy over here that was used. There was hislavitz of kiddusha, there was a carbon that was burnt, and the ashes remain. So again, Avraham Avinu is balancing over here the two. I'm offer and afer. Baruch Hashem, I was offered to be Mekayim many, many mitzvahs. I've burnt many fires and ignited many hearts to be warm to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By that same token, he's also saying, I'm offer, but I'm never going to believe in anything more than dust. He is balancing the way a person has to feel about himself at all times. You're getting a little down, pick yourself up. Getting a little bit too high, tie yourself down a little bit. And therefore the Medrash says, Ata Amarta, you Avraham Avinu said, V'anochi offered the afer, that I am dust and ashes, chayecha. What is going to be your reward amongst several rewards that were given to Avraham Avinu because of that statement?
In this particular medrash, it says the reward is Shani Noisein Lebenecha Kapara Bahem. Klal Yisrael is going to have a kapara through this very same dust and ashes. And the reference is to the Para Aduma. The Pasuk says by the Para Aduma, L'lakhu la'tamei, and they shall take for the tamei me afar streifas hatas. So here the Pasuk uses the lashon of afar, and later on the Pasuk also says, V'yasaf ish tahar if afer hapara, the ashes of the Para Aduma. So both afar and afer are used in connection with the Para Aduma, because the mitzvah of Para Aduma, which purifies us, comes in the chus of Ramavina, who said, Anaychi afar the afer. The Baal Shem Tov says that Gaiva is like the Para Aduma. It's good to be conceited sometimes. Sometimes it's not only detrimental, it's devastating. So, just like the Para Aduma, it purified those that were Tamei, but also Metame, those that were Tahar. Those who worked with the Para Aduma became Tamei themselves. And that's what Gaiva does. A person can have a perfect day, along comes one machshava of Gaiva, telling you how great you are, how much better you are than someone else. It destroys that whole day. And by the same token, sometimes when a person feels that he's falling, that he's sad, getting too sad, bordering on depression, you're mechazik yourself. What's the point of me davening a slow Shemin Esrei? What are my tefillas worth anyhow? Here you have to inject Gaiva. Here Gaiva is a source of Tahara. Rav Shlomo Kalina Shem Yakim Dama said that the Ikri Sahara is when a person forgets that he is a prince, that he is Ben Melech. I'm a Ben Melech. World treasures are open for me. Am I going to really lose everything because of one Avera? Is it worth it? So that's the Para Aduma. It's Natar Tamein. It's Natama Tahira. It's the power of Tahara, and it's the power of Tumah, and you have to learn how to use it. You always have to use it to balance yourself when you feel that you're falling in either one direction or another. And that's the gift that Avraham Avinu gave us. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Teres Vav Mishnah Aleph, about a nova, umilbashtoy a nova. A levush, you put on a nova, you put on modesty like it's a cloak. Dr. Ber Moshe, this is what we're saying. Modesty is like a coat. You have to know when to put it on and when to take it off. When it's cold outside, you put it on. When it's hot, you take it off. When the Yisrael wants to drive a person away from Yiddishkeit by saying you aren't worth anything anyhow, you take off the coat of modesty. And when you feel that you're thinking a little bit too much about yourself and you're so much better than someone else, then by all means, put it on. Why does Parshas Parah come before Parshas HaChodesh? Parshas HaChodesh means a brand new world. But Chazal tell us that Ein Chodesh Tachas Hashem, that everything has already been created by Sheshes Mei Bereshis. There is nothing new. And the answer is it's not a contradiction. If a Yid is mevatel himself, and he's willing to say, I'm putting everything aside, and the Rebbeinu Shalom, I want to do your love, and I want to become batel like Afar and Afer, like the ashes of the Para Aduma. So for all practical purposes, you took your teva, you took your nature, and you were mevatel it. And if you do it in the right way, in the sense of, okay, I really want to correct my life now, I'm ready to start anew. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says, yes, Ein Kol Chodesh Tachas HaShemesh. But for you, there's a new Shemesh. You were mevatel your previous life. You're ready to start new. For you, there's a Shabbos HaChodesh coming. For you, there's a brand new year, a brand new Nisan with all sorts of hashpahs, taivas, with a whole different mazel, with a whole different world of bracha. So Parshas Parah is a hagdama, sort of a prerequisite for Parshas HaChodesh. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu help that in this Shabbos that represents Tahara, we should all be zocheh to learn how to remove the ashes that are piling up within ourselves that inhibits us from truly enjoying this world, and to be zocheh to the haskachas of Nisan and all of its hashpahs taivas. A story is told about one of the Levavot Rebbes who traveled to see the Samsarov. He lived in a distant country in Satamunga Chapta, Bren, Hislavos. He wanted to be by the Samsarov for Rosh Hashanah. Naturally, when you want to do something good, the Yetzer Hara has a tendency of getting in your way, and he had to go through a whole host of obstacles, one more difficult than the other. He finally came within the Tchum of Sams the night of Rosh Hashanah. It was only in the morning that he was able to come into the Beis HaMedrash. and he wanted desperately to hear the Samzer of his bracha on the Tkiyas Shofar. So he ran and ran, and he finally made it. He came to the window, he saw the Samzer of standing there, and he heard the Samzer of scream the words, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. He was sure that was the bracha on Tkiyas Shofar. And he said to himself, it was well worth all the difficulties. The saliva, you can mamish see the fire burning in him. Wow, what a bracha on Tkiyas Shofar. And then he heard the Samzer of continue, Asher Yotzar Tza'adam B'chachma V'Barazai. He was simply making an Asher Yotzar. The bracha on the Tkiyas Shofar would come a little bit later. Our parasha begins, tzav is harin yesbanav leimar. Chazal understand that tzav, as Rashi explains to us, is a lashon of zero. It's an extra encouragement. Miyad u'ledayros. For now and for all future generations. And the question is asked, why, dafka over here by the parasha of the Korban Olah, is there a need for an extra zero? Why would we think that without this added initiative we would have been laid back, so to speak? So the most famous teretz is the Yoser Tzarech HaKasav Lazares B'Mokim Sheyesh Chasar. And Kiss, the Korban Olah, is completely consumed on the Mizbeach. And therefore you need a little bit of extra encouragement. Medaf Abissalah Shtib. The Chassam Sofer explains it a little bit differently. The Chassam Sofer says it's the mitzvahs that we fulfill on a day-to-day basis that require an extra chizuk. The mitzvahs that come around once a year, twice a year from time to time, Chanukah Lech, the Megillah Leinen, the Sidarim, it comes always with a certain sentimental feeling. People look forward to it, families get together, so it generates its own kind of a cheshek. But the Kriya Shema every single day, putting on tefillin every single day, that's what requires the chizuk. Now the symbol for the mitzvah on a daily basis is the Korban Tamid. Every single day throughout the entire year there was one in the morning and one in the evening. And this is the kind of mitzvah that requires the extra zizos and the extra chizuk. Imagine for a moment the driver is taking you someplace and he says, I know this road so well I can do it in my sleep. And then you look up and you see that he is doing it in his sleep. You would be quite concerned to have him wake up despite his familiarity with the road. Because right now, you're in the car. We have to have the same attitude toward a mitzvah. A mitzvah means my life right now. It is today's mitzvah that is going to take me from point A to point B. It is my chiyus. And I have to be equally as concerned to make sure that I am up, because in this case, I'm the driver performing the mitzvah. Now, the Chassam Sofer gives us a more the key side. When it comes to children, you have to create a special scenery. You have to create a scene of excitement, of something different. The good Rebbe changes his teaching methods from time to time. Even in a certain way, his mode of teaching changes from 10 minutes to 10 minutes. Always something new to catch the attention of children. And indeed, the Bala Gada tells us, we don't want the Sippa Yetzias Mitzrayim to be something mundane, to be something casual. You want it dafka to be when the child is sitting all excited by the Seder, watching the beautiful kalim, the matzah that has been so difficult to come by, the morah. We want the child to be caught in a certain mood so that the Sippa Yetzias Mitzrayim indeed goes into his veins. However, says the Chassam Sofer, that's inasmuch as creating, indeed, an exciting, changing scenario for children. But as far as the Gedolim are concerned, we have to learn to train ourselves within the context of the day-to-day mitzvah, when we don't necessarily have matzah and maror laying on the table, the Monday morning Kriyas HaTorah, the Tuesday morning Shachar. And that, says the Chassam Sofer, is the meaning of the words that we say, or ought to say each morning, Ashreinu, she'anu mashkinim u'marivim b'chol yom tamid v'oimem pamayim bi'ahava shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Ashreinu, how fortunate are we that we are zeicha to wake up every morning and to go to sleep every single night, twice a day, for as long as we live, and fulfill the mitzvah of Shema Yisrael at night and Shema Yisrael in the morning, and to do this bi'ahava, with love. In other words, even though the oimem pamayim, even though we say this twice a day, from the time we're old enough to speak, throughout all of our days, as may the Esrim Shana, Despite that, how fortunate are we that we can fulfill this mitzvah, the ahava. And that's why this parsha of the Korban Oila that represents the mitzvah that is done every morning and every afternoon. The pasuk says, "Eish hamizbeach tukad boy." The fire of the mizbeach should burn boy, literally within him. The Chasam Sofer teaches in the heart of the kohen. Uvir aleh hakohen eitzim baboiker baboiker. When the kohen performs this mitzvah of the Korban Oila, morning by morning, whether it is the first day of Pesach or whether it is the second day of Cheshvan or the middle of the summer, it made no difference. Every single morning he performed the mitzvah with the same brand, with the same inspiration that he had to generate within his heart for all those who were watching him, to teach them how to perform the mitzvah. And that's why we have the tzav over here, the extra command, the extra zizos, the extra encouragement. And the lashon of Rashi is, Ein tzav elo lashon zirus. Tzav means nothing else in this context other than zrizos, to make the person work quickly, to give him cheshik, to do it with enthusiasm. And Rashi adds miyad uladayis, for now and for future generations. In other words, what Rashi means to say, says the Chasam Sofer, any kind of a mitzvah that doesn't change, it comes day to day, morning by morning, this generation, next generation. It is ma'asim shebachol yom. These mitzvahs are really the mitzvahs that shape our lives, and they require an extra zrizos, that a person shouldn't do it without kavanah. In a sense, the Torah is telling us that there shouldn't be all that much of a difference between the bracha that we would make on Ki HaShofer, between the bracha that we would make on Achilas Matzah, and our Asher Yotzar. Now, there are two types of mitzvahs. There are mitzvahs that we are mitzvah b'oisa, that means we're commanded to do it, we're mandated to do it. And then there are voluntary mitzvahs, eina mitzvah b'oisa. So if I would ask you which mitzvah is considered greater, from an elementary perspective, we would say, well, if you don't have to do it and you're volunteering to do it, you deserve more credit. The Chazal don't understand it that way. The Gemara paskins, Gadol ha-mitzvah b'oisa. When one performs a mitzvah that he is commanded to do, and he does it in the proper manner, he has more reward, than someone who is volunteering to do the mitzvah and he was never actually commanded to have to do it. Why is this so? The Oilais Ephraim gives us three reasons. He says, number one, that the Yetzer Hara tends to put extra emphasis on mitzvahs that we have to do. That's where we require an extra zrizos. If you're an eina mitzvah b'oisa, if you're volunteering, somehow the Yetzer Hara may not be particularly happy about that, but he doesn't try as hard, he doesn't focus his main efforts on stopping you. Another reason that mitzvah b'oisa is greater is that usually when you're commanded to do a mitzvah, that comes along with guidelines. You have to do it right now. You have to do it during a specific time frame, whether or not you happen to be in the particular mood for that mitzvah at that given time. To volunteer, okay, I'll do it today, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it when I'm ready, I'll do it when I have the cheshik for it, I'll do it when people are looking, whatever the person's cheshbon is. But if you're commanded to do it, you have to do it not based on when it's convenient for you. You have to do it right now. Whenever someone is told to do something right now, that's always a little bit more difficult than, can you just wait a couple of moments and I'll be ready for you? That's another reason why mitzvah b'oisa is greater than an eina mitzvah b'oisa. A third reason explains the Oilais Ephraim is that when it comes to mitzvah b'oisa, you can command your children to do it. I had to do it and I did it, and I want you to carry the torch. I want you to continue on. But if you're an eina mitzvah b'oisa, it's not as easy to make the argument that your children have to follow. Your children can say, look, Father, you put the emphasis on this. We want to put the emphasis on other kinds of mitzvahs. I mean, it wasn't something that you had to do. You picked it. You decided. You elected which ones you wanted to do and which ones you pushed off for later, if indeed we're talking about voluntary mitzvahs. So we have our own choice. And presuming that your father didn't tell you which mitzvahs you should volunteer for, the children could respectfully argue that we will pick our mitzvahs. But if the father was mitzvah b'oisa, then it's a whole different kind of a message. Then it's not a message of choosing, it's a message of doing what you have to do. And the end is all of these three reasons, explains the Oilais Ephraim, lies over here in the Rashi. Tzav Aaron commands Aaron the spawn of Lamer, and the pasuk goes on to discuss the Korban Oila. Rashi tells us, Ein tzav elo l'shem zirus. Tzav is a lashon of zrizos, lashon of encouragement, miyad, for right away, l'dayos, and for future generations. So first of all, Rashi says, ain't tzav a lashon zira. Tzav, when you're commanded to do something, so there is a need for extra zrizos, because the Yetzer Hara tries to undo your zrizos. Day in, day out, again. This is the kind of attitude that you have to fight, that you have to look to dissolve with the heat of the mitzvah. So that's number one. Tzav means if you're commanded, you have to look for that zrizos, and you have to engage that cheshek. Furthermore, Rashi says miyad, right away. When you have this kind of a mitzvah, it is a greater mitzvah because you're not doing it when it's opportune for you. You're doing it when HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded you to do it. There's a Zman Kliyishma, there's a Zman Tefillah, there's a Shkia, there's a Netzach Hama. You have to do it now, miyad. And that's why it has a special chashivas when you're commanded to do something. That's why your schar is greater. And the third thing Rashi says is v'l'doyres for future generations. If you're a mitzvah b'yosef, then you can convey that to your children. It's not necessarily what you want to do, it's what you have to do. And it's interesting, it's brought down the Shlomo Kodesh, he quotes it in the name of others. It is a skula to say this pasuk of Ve'esh HaMizbeach Tukadoi, the fire of the Mizbeach burns within him, to neutralize machshavos rois, bad thoughts. It's a skula to offset the wrong kinds of machshavos. And as far as Pasha, the Rambam says, Ein machshavos ha'orayis misgaberes ala b'leiv ha'panui min ha'chachma. The Yetzer Hara breathes in a vacuum. And when one generates within himself the cheshek of a mitzvah, especially the mitzvahs that are day to day, that are constant, so there's no room for the Yetzer Hara. But no one says it's easy. We are told mitzvah v'aisa is harder than an Eina mitzvah v'aisa for these three reasons. But the words of the Torah are not just instructions. The words of the Torah is the chiyus of our neshama, and therefore, merely by repeating these psukim, we generate within ourselves a cheshek that gives us the power to overcome the impediments of the Yetzer Hara, especially when he tries to hinder the all-important mitzvah v'yosef, the day-to-day mitzvah. Now the pasuk goes on to discuss another aspect of the day-to-day mitzvahs, v'heirem etzadeshen, lifting the ashes of the mizbech and the karbanos, and the process of carrying them out, which within itself was a mitzvah, the mitzvah of Truma Sedeshin. Now, the Mishnah describes to us originally how they decided which kohen got to perform this mitzvah. There was a race. We know that there was a ramp leading up to the mizbeach called the kevesh, and the kohanim would race up this ramp, and whoever came within Dalet Ames first got to perform the mitzvah. After a while, however, it became a little bit aggressive. The kohanim started pushing each other. Someone got hurt. Chazal were scared it would indeed lead to great sakane, so they did away with this method. And they introduced a new way of picking which kohen gets to perform the mitzvah through a peaceful goyrel. It's interesting to note that after the Gemara discusses this, that they did away with the first racing method, and they went to the goyrel method, then there's a whole discussion in the Gemara. When you said beforehand the kohen that gets within Dalet Ames, he gets to do the mitzvah, so there's a whole discussion which particular Dalet Ames of the mizbeach were you referring to. So the sequence over here seems a bit strange. If we would ask the question, what do you mean Dalet Ames from which part of the mizbeach? Before you told us that they did away with this whole method and they introduced the goyrel, fine. But first you tell me that they didn't race anymore because of the danger involved, because the people got too aggressive. They went to a completely different method, and then you go back to say, by the way, when they raced to get to the mitzvah, and you said the one who got within Dalet Ames first, he got to do a Dalet Ames of what? Can you be more specific? It's not even relevant anymore. They didn't use this method anymore. The Sefer Tifchel Yabiyu brings a beautiful word over here from Rav Yasher Zolzman Gesund. He says the Gemara B'Davka presents the story over here in this sequence. When they instituted the first method, let's see, you can race up the ramp and whoever gets within Dalet Ames of the mitzvah gets to do it first. Didn't they anticipate this may lead to problems? The Torah says when they first instituted the method, the kohanim were at the madrega that there was no such thing as pushing someone. Yes, there was a tremendous love and cheshek for the mitzvah. Everyone went running, but you never went running on someone else's cheshbon. You never stepped on anyone else's toes. You never side-checked anybody. No one got shoved, no one got pushed, because the cheshek and the love for the mitzvah was a pure love. It was only in later generations where running for the mitzvah wasn't necessarily out of cheshik, out of enthusiasm to the mitzvah, but it was more so to get there in front of the other person. That's when you suddenly had a whole problem of pushing and shoving and people falling. So the Gemara says originally they did it this way because the Kohanim were worthy of it. There was a real pure cheshik mitzvah. Unfortunately, in subsequent generations, things weren't that great. And then suddenly you had all of this pushing and shoving. However, the Gemara concludes by discussing, by the way, what do you mean who gets there within Dalet Amis? Dalet Amis of which point of the Mizbeach? The Gemara is discussing this with the hope in mind that Liasad Lavi, when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt, once again we're going to be at the Madrega of pure enthusiasm for mitzvah, not just trying to show off, not just to be ahead of someone else. And the Mela will be able to revert back to the original contest of physically running up toward the Mizbeach. Because as long as you're running L'Shem Shemayim, you won't push someone else. When the Sfas Emes first became Rebbe, there was a lot of pushing and shoving as he was about to enter to the Tish, and he said, I'm not entering. So one of the older Chassidim said to him, may I be as bold to remind you that your grandfather, the Chedush Yerim, used to come in, even though there was pushing and shoving. For you, it doesn't pass? So the Sfas Emes answered, there's a big difference. The pushing and shoving in the times of my grandfather was each person trying to get closer. The pushing and shoving now is, how dare you go in front of me, I was here beforehand. This kind of pushing and shoving, my grandfather wouldn't have stood for as well. So when you're running L'Shem Shemayim and you're running to get there first, usually no one else gets shoved. When you're running Shaloi L'Shem Shemayim, but it's in the guise of Cheshik Shel Mitzvah, but your real thought is, don't let him get there first, that's when someone's going to get hurt. And perhaps that's another mahalach here in the Rashi. Tzav, a lashon of Zrizos, yes, Cheshik Shel Mitzvah. Run to the mitzvah, show your love for the mitzvah, miyad u'ledoros. But hopefully, the way the original Kohanim had a love for the mitzvah, a pure love for the mitzvah, not just to get ahead of someone else, that should be able to go over from this generation to the next one. Because if it doesn't, then you have the danger of someone who thinks he's running for the mitzvah when he's really running just to get ahead of someone else. Every morning, a lot was cast among the Kohanim to determine who would have the zchus that day of removing a handful of ashes from the Mizbeach. This was really the first mitzvah, the very first mitzvah of the day. Each morning there was an announcement in the Beis Hamikdash, arise for service, Kohanim, Leviim, and representatives of the community. And right after that announcement, the Avodah commenced with the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen. The lucky Kohen that was zeicha to this mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen immersed himself in the mikveh. He put on the special garments for this particular Avodah. He poured water from the kiyur over his hands and feet. And then he took hold of a silver pan. He went up onto the Mizbeach. He took a handful of ashes from it, placed them into the silver pan, carried the pan with the ashes to the Mizrach side of the kevesh of the ramp, and then he just deposited them on the ground in a special spot designated for that purpose. That was the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen. It was only afterwards that all of the Kohanim really began their day. They poured the water from the kiyur. They hurried up to the Mizbeach to clear it of the remaining ashes. The remaining ashes were piled up in the center of the Mizbeach. They were put into a heap known as a tapuach. Chazal tell us this is a kind of hider, was a kind of beauty for the Mizbeach, because it drew attention to the fact that so many karbanos had been offered. And when the center heap grew too large, the extra ashes were carried to a special place outside Yerushalayim, where they remained protected from the wind and wild animals. Now the kohen who carried out these extra ashes did not wear the regular bigdei kahuna. Rashi tells us it's not proper for a servant to pour wine for his master in the very same garments he wore while cooking the meal. But on the other hand, it had to be done through a kohen. You would think if it was so mundane a task to remove the extra ashes, so it should be done by the cleaning crew. You need a kohen for that? So you have an interesting phenomenon over here. On the one hand, we say the kohen took off his regular bigdei kahuna, because it's not proper for a servant to pour wine for his master in the very same garments he wore while cooking the meal. And on the other hand, we say, but no, it has to be a kohen. It can't just be the custodian. It can't just be the ground crew. It has to be a qualified kohen who removes his regular bigdei kahuna and carries out the ashes. Let's take a closer look at this mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen. and understand what the message is to us. Rav Shlomo Hirsch, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, presents an awesome statement to us, reflecting on this mitzvah. Of course, we all hope Mashiach is going to come tomorrow. We all hope that by the time you're listening to the Shir, Mashiach has already come. But whenever it comes to Chaklo B'chol Yom Shiyavu, but let's imagine for a moment, whenever that time is, you have the last Jewish grandchild, the very, very last Jewish grandchild that is going to be born before the time of Geula. He stands before HaKadosh Baruch Hu with his mission in life that begins from his Maida Ani in the morning and washing Negelwasser and starting to daven. This last Jewish grandchild, on that last day before Mashiach is going to come, like us and like our fathers, is going to have his day planned out for him, which may go according to his plans or not. He's going to have his nisyonos, which he may deal with properly or not, but he's going to try. He's going to remember he is a Yid and his father is a Yid, whether consciously or subconsciously. But what he ought to bear in mind is that in his attempt to deal with the nisyonos of that day, in his effort to make the proper decisions, to master enough bitachon, to get over the hurdles of the fears that are thrown against him, his kiyum of mitzvahs during that day is not an isolated act. Every mitzvah that he does, every machshava toda that he has, adds to all of his predecessors in the whole passing of the centuries. The contribution of that last Jewish grandchild is going to be the conclusion of a chain that is connected, of a task that was given to all of his ancestors, to all of the generations, from Avram Avinu until Mashiach. To quote Rav Hirsch, Zechron Livracha, the Jewish today has to take its mission from the hand of its yesterday. Your parents had their nisyonos. Your grandparents had their nisyonos. Your great-grandparents had their nisyonos. Each and every one of them probably lived in a different area and faced fears, threats. Your mitzvahs, regardless of where you happen to be in your given time, is not isolated, is not independent. It is a continuation of their nisayon. The Rebbeinu Shalom looks at the nisayon of Klal Yisrael from Har Sinai until Mashiach, given all of its phases as one continuous line. And each and every one of us are given our role, depending on what the script of our life is, whatever scene HaKadosh Baruch Hu draws in the backdrop. We either fulfill our role or we don't. If we don't fulfill our role, it has to be done. And as a result, we slow up the whole process. We may have to, although the First doesn't explain this aspect of it, but we may have to come down to this world again to fulfill that role. But it's important to bear in mind that whether you pass or fail, it's not just your personal test over here. It's your link in the chain. Your grandparents in Shemayim are looking down at you and saying, we did what we had to do. Either 100%, 90%, or 80%, they're looking to you to continue that. You're on a field, and it's your turn to run from place to place. So fine, you give it your best shot. If you're part of a relay, someone runs back, crosses the line, gives you the ball, you have to race forward and transmit it further. So there's a greater sense of urgency. The adrenaline is cooking a lot hotter, because you don't view this as your personal success or failure. You view this in terms of responsibility for the team. If I don't grab that ball and race to the other side and pass it properly, the whole team loses. And everyone else's effort, in a sense, is in vain. Well, that's on the relay track. In Avodas Hashem, Chas v'Shalom, the other efforts are not in vain. But in a sense, it's not as embellished as it ought to be. Rav Dessler Zechron Livracha brings from the Ramban that a person doesn't just inherit the estate of his parents. A person inherits part of the neshama of his parents. And that's why it's extremely important. If someone's parents particularly paid attention to a specific mitzvah, that the child continues that mitzvah with Mesiras Nefesh. Because you're not only gaining for yourself, you're gaining for your parents. And any mitzvah a person does is a chutz for parents. But in particular, a mitzvah that a parent paid special heed to. Therefore, Rav Hirsch explains, the Kohanim woke up in the morning, and they're ready to begin a brand new avodah. The call has been made. Wake up, Kohanim! And they're all standing there, and they're all excited. But everything has to wait. Everything is on hold until what is done? Until the ashes of yesterday's korbanos are put into place. The Kohanim were told, today brings no new mission. You have to carry out afresh the mission that yesterday was supposed to accomplish. In other words, you pick up from what was left over yesterday. And he said the Mara de Gevart, if someone takes Hegdish, normally someone takes an item of Hegdish, and he uses it for his own benefit, so he is in violation of Me'ilah. He is Moyel the Hegdish. He has to bring a special carbon, a carbon Hasham Me'ilah, and he has to pay a penalty. But there's a general rule in regard to Me'ilah. And that rule is Kol Shenasa Mitzvah Ein Bo Mishum Me'ilah. Once an object has fulfilled its purpose, once an item of Hegdish was used, and the avodah was carried out, if you use it after that point for your own benefit, although you may have not been permitted to do so, but it's no longer considered Me'ilah. He may not be permitted to do it, but if he does, there's no carbon, there's no penalty. Essentially what we're saying is, once the mitzvah has already been performed, so it doesn't have that same level of kiddush. The exception to the rule is the ashes. In regard to Trumas Hadeshin, which this Sikh begins with, the rule is that it remains Kodesh, even after the prescribed mitzvah of depositing the ashes has been carried out. Should someone use these ashes for his personal benefit, even after the mitzvah has been carried out, he still has to bring a carbon me'ilah. Why? Because if you think, explains the verse about the idea behind Trumas Hadeshin, then you understand there's never a time that the mitzvah has already been fulfilled. The purpose of lifting out the ashes is to show us that whatever you do is a continuation of yesterday. Your whole life is continuity. It picks up where your father or grandfather or great-grandfather left off, and you pass the ball to your children. You cannot begin your avodah until things are in their proper place, and that is, you understand, first we connect to yesterday's avodah. If you can forgive the analogy, I must confess to you, plumbing has never been for my better talents. I'm the one that always tries to save money by doing it myself, and then has to spend more money because when the plumber is finally summoned, he has to first spend time correcting what I did wrong, and only then can he go back to the original problem. So, you would think, however, if a hot water heater went off because someone pulled a lever that closed the flow of water going into it, and there's nothing inherently wrong with the heater, what can be simpler than relighting it? For that, I don't have to call a plumber. All right, so I can't read the instructions. I have to maybe ask someone advice, but this I can do myself. So I see on the knob where it says, turn it on. So I turn it on, but nothing happens. The water is cold, the showers are cold, the washing machines are cold. Must be something wrong. After all, I did turn it on. So you ask a friend that may be better versed in this than you, and he says to you, did you turn on the pilot? Did you light the pilot? Without the pilot, turning on is nothing. All right? So after much effort and many, many boxes of matches, the pilot, Baruch Hashem, has been lit, and it's burning. But the showers are still cold, and the dishes still remain in the sink, and only the cold wash is being done. What did I do wrong now? What's the matter with this hot water heater? So I am told, which obviously I did not know, that you turn the knob to pilot in order to light it. And then you turn the thermostat to the desired temperature. But if you leave the knob on pilot, the main flame doesn't turn on. The pilot has to be lit. The temperature has to be set, but you have to turn another knob which goes from pilot to the regular flame, as any good plumber would explain to you when he is finally summoned to turn it on. But in a sense, this is what we're saying now. I on my own am nothing. I can be a hot water tank. I can be full of fuel, full of heat, full of energy, full of cheshek. I have to understand, unless there's a pilot light, unless I view myself in the perspective of I am carrying the ball from my avos, my independent avodah is meaningless. It doesn't get started. Somewhere along the line, if it was not my parents, it was my grandparents, my great-great-parents, somewhere along the line, if there is a mitzvah tzav, if there is a spark within me that yearns for kedusha and ruchnius, then there is a pilot light that is burning over there that I have to understand and learn how to pick up from that and to continue. And this is true even in regard to a bear, because there's a mitzvah tzav somewhere along the line that he's picking up from. That's why even a bear can say Elokei Avraham. The over from the Ger Tzedek, and the Gra was masking to this, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu went to all of the Ummah Ha'olam and he asked them, do you want the Torah? And they all said, well, what does it say in the Torah? Like Shirtzach, it's not for us. Like Signev, it's not for us. But there were Yechidim that wanted, but were outvoted. And these are the Neshamas, later Neshamas of Gerim that associated themselves to Klal Yisrael. So even if someone is a Ger Tzedek, there was something there in his ruchniistic genes, in the genes of his Neshama, that he was connecting to, that makes him want to engage in Avdas Hashem. If you don't understand that, if you don't focus on the pilot light, you will not get your flame lit. By the same token, if a person just relies on Chus Avos and says, well, my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather was this great Rebbe, great Rosh Yeshiva, and you do nothing about it, then you're left with just a pilot light, which also does not heat the water. Now what's interesting explains this Sfas Emes is the Pasuk begins Zos Torah Ha'olah, introducing us to the process of Karban Olah, and then the Pasuk goes on to describe the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshin. So why is this Zos Torah Ha'olah? Trumas Hadeshin is the mitzvah achrayna. It's the last step to all of the Karbanos for the previous day. So how does the Torah begin Zos Torah Ha'olah and then go on to Trumas Hadeshin, which is the last step? Elamaisa the Sfas Emes, the message over here is that the entire avodah of the Karbanos hinges on that last step being done properly, on the lifting of the ashes. Why is this so? The Karban Olah is mechaper on bad machshavos. Indeed, the Shloah HaKadosh says that a skula against machshavos that are not proper is to verbalize the pasuk Eish Tamid Tukat Ala Mizbeach Lo Sichba. The fire of the Mizbeach that burnt throughout the night, that was a tahara on those who seek tahara of their machshavos. When a person does tshuva, and he attempts to burn up the bad machshavos, and he attempts to burn up his bad averos, the carbon chatas also has to be burnt. The success of that tshuva depends on, well, where does he go from there? A person can realize that he did averos, fall into an atzvus, fall into a depression, and give up and say, what's the point? So he's left with the ashes that piled up. But he missed the main point. The main point is that he's supposed to continue the thrust over here. The ashes have burnt up. Now, I take that ra and convert it to tzav. I say, okay, I did my averos. Now I'm doing tshuva, and on this momentum of tshuva, I shall be better than I was before. So it's easy for a person to fall into a yish and say that I was so bad yesterday, what's the point of continuing today? No, that's not the idea. The idea is, yes, I acknowledge what I did yesterday. Hopefully that is burnt up, but I am going to lift those ashes. I'm not going to let them fester within me. I'm going to say yesterday was yesterday. I realize what I did wrong. I am embarrassed. That within itself is an avodah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I'm going to continue from there. And I'm going to, if you can't do that, if you can't lift the ashes from yesterday's avodah and continue on, then the whole tshuva process is brought to a grinding halt and doesn't accomplish what it's supposed to. And that's what the pasuk tells us to start with. This is the point of the remorse. So in the end, it's encouragement. The Baal Shem HaKadosh says, Adarabah, if a person has a bad machshava during a mitzvah or during a davening, so in Hashemayim, they're giving you the opportunity of not allowing it to get you down, of dismissing it, and forging on, and as a result, you have taken the Karach of Ra, and you are Mahapachet L'Tayv. So you may have to change your clothes for the Truma Sedeshin. But it's not only a vital part of the Avodah, it's the objective of the Avodah.
This shiur is distributed by Kol Hadas, 11 Stei Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.